704D, right? And we talked about partnership losses. That you are limited in taking your partnership losses, right? With respect to the fact that you're limited by basis, the at-risk rules, passive losses, and new code section 461L, right? 4 limitations. And keep in mind, just like Crane, for those who remember the Crane case, is that when you buy property, Congress permits you, if you go buy property with recourse or non-recourse liability, even if you don't put down $1, you buy $1 million building, your basis in that building is $1 million. Agreed?
Yes.
And you can take depreciation deductions. You're afforded basis in that property. And that philosophy extends to partners. They are afforded tax basis in their purchases. So that whether it be recourse or non-recourse, in terms of allocating basis, you allocate it to the partner most apt to take the deduction. And we'll see what that means in terms of these rules. And the regulations under 752-2 expound on recourse debt, and the regulations under 752-3 expound on non-recourse debt. And the authors, true to their word, beginning on page 199, ask you to read, and unlike the substantial economic effect, George, the regulations here are not, they don't take 5 minutes to read, but they don't take 3 hours to read. So I encourage you to read them, and they have several examples. And again, unlike the substantial economic effect, the examples don't go on for 3 pages. They go on for 2 paragraphs. So consider reading those. All right. So with respect to recourse liabilities, first the authors give us general background, and they define what is a liability, and we know what liabilities are in general. And then, and this is why I keep emphasizing when we go through this material, really consider marking in red recourse versus non-recourse, because the outcomes are so different, the rules are so different. It behooves you to not go down the wrong path. It's not a good omen for me or for you if you go down the wrong path. So with respect to recourse liabilities, doomsday, dystopia, speaking of dystopias, we got a doomsday scenario, right? What happens if everything becomes worthless? Who has to pony up to the bank, right, or the creditor? Who has to do it? So I have highlighted in red on page 201, 4 or 5 lines down. In general, a partner bears the economic risk of loss for a partnership liability to the extent he ultimately would be obligated to pay the debt if all partnership assets were worthless and all liabilities became due and payable. So that becomes critical. That's what you're supposed to do. Even cash becomes worthless. So the authors expound on page 201, what is a constructive liquidation? And on page 202, it describes in the first and only full paragraph the doomsday scenario. Who's going to end up paying what? On page 203, the authors offer a nice example. Not Not exceedingly hard to follow, guys. Not exceedingly hard to follow. They make the point on the top of page 105, which, if you're following the logic of what might happen here, on the top of page 105 it says, the preceding example illustrates the broader general rule that recourse debt is ordinarily allocated only among the general partners and not to any limited partners. All right, which makes sense, right? Because do limited partners go negative? No. Unless they agree to. So unless they give a promissory note or guarantee or pledge, in those instances they can. It's pointed out on the top of page 206, and the regulations make this point, even if the limited partner guarantees a debt, and suppose, for argument's sake, that David and I are, I'm the limited partner, David's the general partner, and I guarantee the debt, solely guarantees the debt. Who looks responsible at the end of the day? Guaranteed. Sounds like I'm liable, ultimately. And that debt should be allocated to me. But, under local law, if I have a right of what's called subrogation, where under this right, I stand, once I pay off the debt, suppose we borrowed $1 million, and I guaranteed, and I actually have to honor the debt and pay the $1 million, and then I become what's called subrogated. I can now stand in the shoes of the creditor, and I can now go after David, because as a subrogated guarantor, I retain the rights to go after the other people. Then ultimately David's still on the hook, right? If I have it's called a right of subrogation. If I have no right and I pay off the debt, then truly that allocation should be to me. Let me remind people, because people I know in the past, students, practitioners, sometimes they get lost in the mud. What is this all about? What is this code section all about? What are we doing under code section 752? See the bigger picture, guys. What is the bigger picture? Remember, George, when we were doing substantial economic effect, I emphasized that chapter was largely about maintaining capital accounts, right? This chapter is about outside tax basis. Everyone understand? Do not get lost here. This chapter, the essence of this chapter is dealing with what is the partner's outside tax basis. Code section 752 is a methodology to know what is the outside tax basis. One more factoid I learned last night. I had to go to a lecture, and I'm not a big baseball fan, but in my yesterdays, watched baseball. For those who periodically watch, there is a pitcher who never threw a pitch over the plate, but he won the game. Okay? He was given the win. Never threw a pitch over the plate. How could that happen? How could a pitcher earn a win in a game and not throw one pitch over the plate? So I'm giving you guys, not only, George, can you talk about substantial economic effect, I'm giving you one more thing to talk about tonight when you get home. Okay, for you non-baseball fans, picture, it's the top of the ninth, and you're pitching, and you're called in. There's 2 outs, runners on first and second, and you're about to throw a pitch to home plate. Your team's losing. Okay, it's the top, and your team is the home team. They're going to get up at the bottom of the ninth. What happens? The runner leads too far off second. You don't throw a pitch. The first thing you do is you throw to second base and you pick off the runner. Okay? Inning is over. You didn't throw one pitch over the plate. Bottom of the ninth, your team scores 2 runs. Your team wins, you get the win. There's a pitcher's sudden. This happened about 10 years ago, I understand. And you got the victory without throwing a pitch. All right. So you might find that interesting. Maybe you didn't. But. All right. So anyway,
I don't understand.
just a reminder. Again, why are we here for tonight? Why this chapter? Allocating tax basis for purposes of liabilities. Okay? This is not capital accounts, guys. Not capital accounts. We're talking about outside basis. Okay? Beginning on page 206, there's a discussion about regulatory guidance on guarantees and indemnity agreements. We're going to keep it real simple. I want people, for exam purposes and practice purposes, to keep it as simple as possible. Do not worry about, what do they call it, bottom dollar payment obligations, okay? Beyond the scope of this course. I want people to get the general principles. We don't have to worry about this stuff. If you have this come up, okay, they'll deal with it. But I just want people, when you leave this course, to have the general concepts, all right? Non-recourse liabilities, okay? So recourse, doomsday. Everyone got that? We're going to allocate liabilities based on that doomsday scenario. Non-recourse liabilities. Just to make your life interesting, we're going to have a 3-layer cake for those who are into 3 layers. On page 210, the 3 layers, the top layers, we got to shave off. The partner share of the partnership minimum gain. Okay, under 704B, it's the partnership minimum gain. That's layer 1. Layer 2, non-recourse liabilities incurred by the encumbered property. The amount of gain the partner would recognize under 704C. The partnership disposed of the property in a taxable transaction in full satisfaction. A Tufts-like gain. Tufts-like gain. And third, the partner share of any remaining, it's referred to the excess non-recourse liabilities determined in accordance with the partnership profits, okay? So there's 3 tiers. And what are they going to do? They're going to elaborate what is the meaning of each of the 3 tiers. So the first on 210 is the lowest layer of the cake, or the one most apt to apply. It's whatever the profits are. Okay, I said when we talked in chapter 2, I said in general, non-recourse liabilities are generally allocated in accordance with the partner's profits interest. That you can take to the bank. That's the general rule. Again, simple rule of thumb, recourse liabilities in accordance with the losses, right? And then I promised you that it would get, it's not that I promised you in a threatening way, I just said, hey, when we go through chapter 6, it's going to be more complicated, and here's the more complicated part. So you got the profits interest, but then the first layer of the cake is the partner's share of partnership minimum gain. Okay? And you can read this for yourself. It doesn't come up too often, this first layer of the cake. It does not come up too often. It's where the adjusted basis, okay, excuse me, let me phrase it differently. The liability is in excess of fair market value. Okay? The liability of the contributed property is in excess of fair market value of the property. I will repeat. It actually refers to the fair market value. And not too many people contribute property where the liability is in excess of fair market value. What could happen? That's layer 1. That's the very top. That correlates to the first layer. The second layer is the minimum gain, and this is spelled out on page 213.
211?
No. 211 is the first layer of the cake. 213 is the second layer of the cake.
No, so
Hold on. The third layer, listen, I didn't write this, guys. Page 210 is the third and most common layer. Okay? 210, the italicized language. Partner share of partnership profits. That's the most, I'll say, utilized. Okay? That's the bottom layer, third layer, right? If you look at the first paragraph on page 210, they describe 3 layers of the cake. And they actually discuss layer 3 first. Okay? That's the profits interest. Layer 2, or excuse me, there you go, Vico. Layer 1 is described on page 211. And this layer does not come up much, but you should be aware of it. And say again? And then, Jonah?
You just said that layer 1 is on the page 211. Are we talking about
No, yeah, it is on page 211.
Yeah, okay.
Okay? It's the partnership minimum gain. Partnership minimum gain. And then finally, on page 213, the partner shares of 704C gain. Partner shares of 704C gain. Okay? And we've seen this before, it's the Tufts-like gain. Like most of these things in this course, guys, looking at the examples are helpful, tremendously helpful to just connect the dots. For exam purposes, you're not going to see part recourse, part non-recourse. That's spelled out on page 214. Part recourse, part non-recourse. Don't look for that on the exam. We're going to try to shed some of the layers of complexity here because I know you're not going to be able to absorb it all. Now, I will say this, if you slowly go through the revenue ruling, 95-41, it's really a good revenue ruling to go through. So once you've read or reread, I'd like to say reread, the regulations under 752-2 and 752-3, I really do think that you will have, I'd like to think, fingers crossed, you can read this revenue ruling. And again, it's really nicely explanatory. And the numeric are not hard to follow. So consider going through it yourself, all right? Because it goes through, if you begin on page 216, notice it goes through first tier allocation. Jonah, you'll appreciate this. First tier, page 217, second tier, and then page 218, third tier, right? Or three layer cakes. And you'll notice on page 218 how much flexibility there might be with respect to the allocations of profits, right? Partners are at liberty to allocate profits as they want as long as there's substantial economic effect. All right, so consider this because it explains all 3 layers of the cake in a very nice fashion. On page 220, don't worry about tiered partnership, guys. You're going to have your work cut out for you without tiered partnerships. I'll be happy if you could get, where they're not tiered. All right, but my job tonight is to make sure that we finish this chapter. All right, so let's just meander, beginning on page 221 with problem. Notice, problem 1 deals with recourse. So I have highlighted the word recourse. Problem 2 deals with non-recourse, okay? And I had the word non-recourse underlined. So look, the authors are going to try to illustrate each of their points. And it says they each contribute $20,000 to ABC partnership. The partnership agreement satisfies the primary test for economic effect, right, George? Yes. Substantial economic effect. Partnership profits are allocated 40% to A, 40% to B, 20% to C. Partnership uses 60% cash and $60,000 cash. Excuse me, borrows $40,000 on a recourse basis and purchases land for $100,000, right? All right, so far so good, and again, even though they each make equal capital contributions, are they at liberty to divide the profits 40, 40, and 20, guys? Yeah, that's their business, right? All right, they can do as they please. All right, now, it's recourse. How are we going to divvy up this liability to determine their outside basis? Right, because we know their initial outside basis, right, guys? They each contributed 20,000, right? And we know under code section 2722, their outside basis is each 20,000. Everybody agree? It's a 721 transaction. This should bring you home to chapter 2, right? So, but we are looking at a doomsday scenario, right? Everything's going south. We're going to lose $100,000, right? We got to see who's going to have to pay the piper if this partnership goes under, right? And the notion of a constructive liquidation is spelled out where? Regulation 752-2B. 752-2B. That means that we have $100,000 loss on our hands, right? We have a $100,000 loss. And we have to figure out how to divvy up that $100,000 loss. What are A, B, and C, their capital accounts? Because we're going to see who bears, right? Capital accounts, right? Determine who has to pony up at the end of the day, right? What do their capital accounts start with? 20, right? And if the partnership loses $100,000, how does it get split up?
33 each.
Say again, Dave?
33 each.
How are they splitting up?
40, 20.
Oh, 40, 40, 20. Okay.
Who's gonna pay the piper here, guys?
A and B.
A and B. Who should be allocated the liability? Who? No. A and B have to pony up. They should get allocated the liability. So what's A and B's outside basis, guys?
40, 40.
40 and 40. And C's outside basis?
20.
20. All right, that makes sense. We bought an asset worth 100. A and B are going to have outside basis each of 40. And C will have an outside basis of 20. Agreed? So we're using capital accounts as a methodology, right, to figure out who bears the risk of loss. But once we figure it out, the game is not over, right, guys? It's just a methodology. Everyone agree? This is not an answer I want to see on the exam. I would like to know what their outside basis is, right? One of you? One of your client? And the regulations under 752-2F, examples 1 and 2. I'll repeat. 752-2F, examples 1 and 2 spells this out. All right, let me pause. If you don't get A, game over, guys. And we're not talking Fortnite. We're talking, tax here. Any problems? Any misgivings? Any hesitations? Recourse debt. We look at who's bearing the economic risk. Question B. What results in A above if A, B, and C had contributed 10,000, 20,000, and 30,000? So how would their capital accounts be divvied up? 10, 20, and 30, right? Okay, how is that $100,000 loss now going to be divvied up? 40, 20, and 20 again, right?
40, 40, and 20.
Yeah, that's what I meant to say, but So now they owe the bank, right? A and B owe the bank 40, well, A owes 30, B owes 20, and the bank comes knocking and C comes knocking, right? C is owed 10, and the bank is owed 40, right? So that $40,000 liability, right? Or that $40,000 liability. It's a 50. So in this case, guys, what would A and B's outside basis be? The point I'm doing is, if the bank comes knocking, wouldn't taxpayer A owe 3/5 of 40 to the bank, and B owe 25/5 of 40 to the bank, right? Everyone agree? So, isn't A's outside basis starts off with 10 plus 24 equals 34, starts off with 20 equals 36, right? And C's outside basis is 30, right? Everyone see that? This is A, this is B. Okay, all I'm doing is, this is allocating the debt, this is the debt, and this is their original basis, right? Under Code Section 722. Yeah, they each owe 50, that's where it came from.
Outside is 26 for B, 24 for A.
Right. Which is their original basis, right? Plus the amount of the debt. All right? Nothing fancy. George, you got that?
Yes.
Minna, you got that?
C will be 30.
C would be the initial basis, yes. C would be 30. I'm going to do something dangerous here. So, the 20 people on WebEx, I don't think there's 20. Can you repeat the answer to 2A? That was long ago. I apologize. I don't know what you meant by 2A. But hopefully everyone on WebEx listening, you understand this, right? So now I can go back and not even wait and hope you understand it. How's that? All right. We're good? Question C. What results in A if A and B are limited partners who are not obligated to restore a capital account deficit, but the partnership agreement includes a qualified income offset? So, what does their capital account start at, guys? 20, right? And now, things got bleak, right? Doomsday. How's that going to be allocated? Let me just ask. Neil, we didn't hear from you tonight. How are we going to divvy up that 100,000? David, see if you agree. Just say it loudly. People on WebEx want to hear your voice.
I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Say again? You don't want to say the wrong thing? You're allowed. We're all friends here.
I would say probably for 40, 20, but
You say 40, 40, 20. David, what do you say?
Would everything go to C?
What's everything?
The liability?
So, but I don't understand. How are we going to divvy up this 100,000 loss, Angie? Or David, give me numbers.
40, 40, 40.
20, 20, 60, right? Why? Because A and B don't want to go negative, right? They're limited partners, right? Right? They do not want to go negative, kids. Is that a sigh of disgust or a sigh of just pure joy at getting this, Kevin?
We'll go back.
I'm getting out of here because I'm tired.
You're
Yeah.
not getting out yet. Not yet. All right? All right. Kevin, you need a little caffeine. It's empty. That means you need a refill. All right. Everyone got that?
Yes.
C is feeling the heat. C, taxpayer C, is feeling the heat, right? So what happens to C's outside basis? Goes up to what, Ramon? Eva? You're whispering. I mean, isn't that why we're here, Kevin, tonight? Say again? 80? 20 plus. No, 20 plus, what's the liability? So 20 plus 40. C's basis goes to 60, A and B stays at 20, right? Everyone got that? C's outside basis climbs under 752 to 60. A and B's 20 each, right? We good? D, what results in C above? Okay, so we're same problem. A contributes a $15,000 stock to the partnership as security for the liability, and all income gain or loss on the stock. And by the way, I'll just point it in C. It doesn't matter if it has a qualified income offset, right? Because you can't go negative. Everyone agree? You can't go negative even with a qualified income offset. If you accidentally do, you got to be allocated income, so that doesn't help you. All right, back to D. A contributes $15,000 stock as security, and all income gain or loss on the stock is allocated to A. What results if A contributes this $15,000 note as security for the liability? So the question is, contributing stock as security, how is that going to change the outcome here? If A gives security, A, B, and C, there's a $100,000 loss again. Everyone agree? And we have to allocate that loss. Agreed? How are we going to allocate that loss, guys?
So it's 35,000 for A.
We can allocate 35,000 to A, right?
Yes.
Because he can't go negative 15. He's pledged stock as security, right? B cannot go negative, right? And C will end up bearing the burden, right? Because he's a general partner, all right? And this would work to that extent. The regulations under 752-2H2 and 3, 752-2H2, H2 and H3 say that his C's capital account can go negative. So how are they going to divvy up this recourse note? 15,000 of the recourse note would be allocated to A. 25 of the recourse note would be allocated to C. What will happen if A contributes a promissory note will the outcome be the same? And the outcome will be the same, okay? The outcome will be the same. And why? Because if there's a doomsday scenario, A will pick it up. Question E, what results in C above? Okay? If A personally guarantees the $40,000 of liability. A personally guarantees it. And this gets back to the point I made with David, right? If you recall, what's the issue, guys? If A guarantees it, does A have a right of subrogation? If A has no right, and if he ends up where, if he pays it, he has no recourse against C, the general partner, then the entire liability will be allocated to A. His outside basis will go up by 40. What's by authority? If you look at regulation 752-2B3, one little I, I'll repeat, regulation 752-2B3, one little I. But if A has a right of subrogation where he pays off the liability, and now A can go after C. If A can now go after C, okay, then C is going to end up holding the bag, and A does not get any of that debt allocated to his basis. So this is under 752-2B5. I'll repeat, 752-2B5. And if you look at the regulations under 752-2F, example 4, it illustrates this point. So you can look also at 752-2B3, 3 little I. I'll repeat, 752-2B3, 3 little I. And what you've seen here, problem A, B, C, D, and E, guys. If there is a doomsday, who gets saddled? Okay? Who gets saddled? Right? That is the issue. That is the issue. Question 2. We're changing gears, right? You see the word recourse. You go from regulation 752-2, you go to regulation 752-3. Are you looking at partnership losses anymore? Heck no. Primarily you're looking at profits, right? It is a triple layer cake, most common layer, profits. Question 2, G and L. Form a limited partnership. G, the GP, contributes $10,000, and L, the LP, contributes $90,000. The partnership purchases a building on leased land, paying $100,000 in cash, and borrowing $900,000 on a recourse basis, right? From a commercial lender, securing the loan or the mortgage on the building. Okay? Very common, right, guys? We're buying $1 million building. The terms of the loan require payment of market rate interest, no principal, so the principal is going to stay the same, and we're going to assume that the building is depreciable $50,000 a year in the next 20 years. Do the arithmetic, that's $1 million, right? Keeping the facts real simple. And all other income equals expenses. The partnership contains, look at this, qualified income offset, and G is required to make up any capital deficit, except as otherwise required by a minimum gain chargeback provision. Right, there's a minimum gain chargeback, right? We asked that question, I asked that question before. So there is a minimum gain. As a result of the non-recourse borrowing, the capital accounts can therefore go negative, right? Your agreement allocates profit and losses 90% to L and 10% to G until such time as the partnership recognizes items of income and gain that exceed the items of deduction and loss that it is recognized over its life. Subsequent partnership income and losses are allocated equally between the two. So first they allocate losses, then they try to get income, and once they get back their initial investment, they're going to split the income 50-50. Assume that it's reasonably anticipated that equal allocations will begin after 10 years, but who knows? But there is that expectation that it's going to take 10 years until this company, they're able to recoup their initial investment. All right? Partnership agreement states that G and L each have a 50% interest for purposes of 752. How is the $900,000 allocated in year 1? How is the liability allocated at the end of year 3? And then it goes on from there, okay? So, given this fact pattern, guys, we know that no partner bears the economic risk of loss. I don't know what I just touched. And that is truly non-recourse. At least for the moment, there does not appear to be any minimum gain. There is no minimum gain here. Okay? There's no minimum gain in year 1. So how are we going to allocate the liability? Well, now we're just at the third layer of the cake, okay? And what was their initial basis? Do you know? Their initial basis was their outside basis, their capital contribution, right? 10 to 90. And how are we going to divvy up the $900,000 worth of liability? No, we're going to do it in accordance with their profits, right? And the expectation is, for purposes of 752, they said they're going to, the last sentence of the problem say 50-50. So we're going to allocate 450 and 450, right? So their outside basis is 540, right? 540 to 460, right? Everyone agree? That's their outside basis. Agreed? Because we're going to, for 752 purposes, right? It's in accordance with profits, right? So, and we're told, the last sentence of the problem, assume that they're going to, for 752 purposes, treat profits as 50-50. Agreed? That's the answer. I know you want more complicated, but you can't deliver on that. Until we get to question B. Okay, how will the liability be allocated at the end of year 3? Now, what's the building's we bought the building for $1 million, right? Liability, that was its fair market value. What was the liability? $900,000 and its balloon, right? Everyone agree? How much depreciation do we take in year 1 and year 2, guys? 50 and 50, right? Every year we take $50,000 of depreciation, right? Everyone agree? Year 1, year 2, year 3. Everyone agree? Everyone see that? Our adjusted basis is $850,000. Yeah. how is that gonna be divvied up? G and L. What do you notice about this? Is there a minimum gain here, guys? Is there a minimum gain?
Yes.
How much? 50, right? Everyone see the liability is 900,000 and the adjusted basics is 850. That creates a $50,000 minimum gain, right? And how is this $50,000 deduction allocated? Where are the deductions being allocated, guys? Where the $50,000, all these $50,000 deductions, how are they being allocated? Are they being allocated 90-10? So that G gets 10%, L gets what percent? 90%, right? Because the only thing we have are $50,000 deductions, agreed? And in year 3, we have a 50,000 minimum gain, right? Is that the second layer of our cake, guys? Everyone agree? Now we have a tier 2. In problem A, we had only a tier 3, but now we have a tier 2, right? Because we have this minimum gain of $50,000. Agreed? So in that case, with that 50,000, how's that going to be allocated? 5,000, 45,000, right? And that's the minimum gain. How is the excess going to be allocated? The lowest tier, the tier 3. The tier 3 gets allocated, we're told in the partnership agreement, 50-50. What is the tier 3? It's the excess. We already took care of 50,000 of the liability, right? How much of the liability remains? 850. So what ends up happening is the balance is 425 is the excess. What does this equal? 900,000. So we have tier 2 allocation, we have a tier 3. Now, just to remind people, I just want to point this out and then I'll take your questions. I keep telling you, what is their outside basis? Let's go back to in problem B. It starts off at 10 and 90, right? Everyone agree? And I'm telling you, at the end of year 3, we're going to allocate, I just told you, the basis, the liability, 430, 470, right? Those are the numbers. What's their total basis? 440. Hold on one second. I'm going to get to 560. How much depreciation do they have? Every year, G got 5,000 or 10% of the depreciation times 3. 5,000 per year times 3. That becomes 425 outside basis. How much depreciation did L get? 45 per year times 3. This is depreciation. This is liability. 425. So the total outside basis is 850. That should be right because we know that the inside basis of this building is 850 as well. Okay? That's the outside basis for G and L. I'm just going to point this out because this may help you, because what you can see here is every year if you do it in accordance with B. In year 4, is there going to be more minimum gain, guys? Yes, because what's going to happen to the basis? It's going to drop to 800,000. Everyone agree? And the minimum gain is going to go from 50 to 100,000, right? And we're going to have to, every year, we're going to have this craziness. We're going to have to reallocate the outside basis because every year we're going to have a different number for the minimum gain. It's going to be, excuse my language, a pain in the ass. So instead, oops, sorry about that. I don't know. Okay. Question C, though, helps us a little bit. How will the liability be allocated if at the end of year 1 and year 3, if the excess non-recourse liabilities are allocated in a ratio of 90% to L and 10% to G? And what the authors are driving at is that if you do this all up front, you take that, you know what the liability is. It's $900,000, right, guys? And we know G's outside basis starts at 10, L's at 90. And if this building over time gets depreciated in its entirety, everyone agree? This building gets depreciated in its entirety. We have $1 million building, and at least initially the deductions, right, are 90-10. Everyone agree? Who do you think should get the liability if you're going to do this all up front? And the code, you want to make sure, let's put it this way, L can get the full amount of depreciation, right? He's making this investment, he's expecting depreciation deductions. You would expect 90% of 900,000, right? Because ultimately, L should get $900,000 of deduction, everyone agree? And G should get 10% of 900,000 or 90,000, right? 90,000, right? So what ends up happening in that case is that, why don't we just cut to the chase? And that's what often happens here, that L's outside basis would start at 900,000, right? And G's outside basis would start at 100,000. And this way, unlike problem B, you don't have to go through any reallocations. There's no reallocations to go through. Question D. What results in A above if the debt is guaranteed by G, who has no right of reimbursement from the partnership? Does the result change if G has a right of reimbursement from the partnership? What if G has very few assets? Well, what this question is raising is this debt recourse or non-recourse if G has the economic risk of loss here? And G now guarantees the debt, guess what? It is no longer non-recourse, it is recourse, okay? It's recourse. So this would now be under 752-2B1. And who would the liability be allocated to and whose basis would go up? It would all go allocated to G. The whole liability, all 900,000 would be allocated to G. Does it matter if G has a right to reimbursement? Who would G go after?
L.
Who?
L.
L is a limited partner, can't go after L.
Can go up.
His right of reimbursement, worthless. So it has no bearing here. And so the right of reimbursement is worthless. What happens if G has no assets or little assets? That's okay as long as this was not planned to be abusive, okay? If the anti-abuse regulations say, you know, we're not going to look at G's assets unless there's some sort of abuse. That's in regulation 752-2J. 752-2J. So the author's point is indeed you take what's non-recourse and by guaranteeing it, you make it recourse. And in question E, it says, what results in A above if the debt had been guaranteed by L, and L has a right for reimbursement from the partnership? Okay? If that's true, this is who gets allocated the $900,000? No, L does not, G does. Why? Because if you look, L has a right of reimbursement, so he can be subrogated and go after G. So even though L has the guarantee, once he pays the guarantee, he can go, who's left holding? G. So in this case, G would be ultimately obligated. This is under 752-2B3, one little I. 752-2B3, one little I, and -2B5. L pays it, but then that L can sue G, because now L steps into the shoes of the creditor and can go after G. And question F, what result in A above if G is the lender? So if G is lending the money, is this recourse or non-recourse? No, if G is the lender, guess what? If the loan goes bad, G is going to end up holding the loan. So it becomes recourse just because G is lending the money. So this is under 752-2C, one little I. I'll repeat, 752-2C, one little I. Now, give me 2 minutes before you close your books. Question 3, I don't want to rush through, we'll go through. Question 4, don't worry about it, too complicated for our purposes. Look at chapter 7 for 2 minutes and then we'll call it a night. Chapter 7, compensating the service partner. Generally, if you look on page 224, partners can function in 3 different capacities. Capacity 1, they can function as a non-partner, okay? As if I did work, we had a real estate partnership, and I'm a lawyer, and I do non-real estate work. I do a closing, which is not really what the partnership's all about. I'm not functioning as a partner, I'm functioning as an independent contractor, code section 707A1. Sometimes partners say, look, I'm going to do A, B, and C, but if I do A, B, and C, I want X dollars per year. That's called a guaranteed payment under code section 707C. Whatever's left, for all your hard work, that is considered a distributive share. So there's 3 different ways to look at this, okay? And they're spelled out there on page 224. The rest of the chapter will elaborate on these 3 different kind of formats, and my goal is to try to get through all of chapter 7. It's not that long. I think we should be able to do it, and you're not worried about, I mean, we're going to talk about carried interest. I don't expect that to be on the exam, so we're going to review question 2 as well. So guys, thank you for coming. Those people on WebEx, thank you for sharing the night with us. All right? I hope everyone heard me. And those are WebEx. Have a good night. A good week at work. And we'll see everyone next Wednesday. 2 weeks from tonight, our exam. All right? And sign up for October 26th.
Yeah.